As it removed its mask, a huge burst of magical energy exploded outward. Whoosh! Scary waves of magic flashed around them. All the hunters stopped moving, like deer, suddenly seeing a tiger. Oh my goodness! How could someone have so much magical power? Is that who we're supposed to fight? The creature looked at the hunters' worried, upset, and regretful faces, and smiled cruelly. Are you scared of me, humans? Ki-hun clenched his teeth and forced himself to take a step forward. Why did you bring us all the way here? You could have let your fighters defeat us. The shaman gave a scary smile. Why did the creature bring us here? The shaman went on. While we wait, I will kill each of you one by one to entertain my followers. Roar. The tall orc warriors shouted with excitement. The hunters were struggling against the orcs and found it hard to breathe. One hunter started to cry, but then the shaman stopped talking. It looked directly at Jinwoo. Something seemed strange to it among the humans. Ki-hun's eyes widened. Now is our chance. They needed to act quickly. He could feel the tension building within him. Now, Ki-hun shouted, pulling out his sword and running forward. But everything was quiet behind him. He turned to look at his friends as he ran and saw they were frozen, unable to move. They had given up fighting because the enemy was so strong. Ki-hun felt his heart drop. No, but somebody had to try. He couldn't stop now. He looked ahead. The shaman kept making fun of them, and its guards just stood there. This might be their only chance. Maybe it was luck, or maybe it was fate, but as long as his sword could reach, he ran forward with all his strength and lifted his sword high. Yes, but he crashed into something before he could even hit it. Crash. It was a magical shield. Ugga. Cocoon fell to the ground, and rolled a few times. But he quickly stood up. Here's our first brave fighter. The shaman laughed, and Cocoon's body suddenly floated into the air. Whoosh! It was magic that made things float. The shaman kept moving its lips and used magic to lift Cocoon as high as a 2-story building, then cast another spell. Cocoon instantly fell to the ground. But before he could even feel the pain, he was floating up again. Floating magic. Be here. The shaman and the other orcs laughed, showing all their teeth. Whoosh, Cocoon. The shaman played with Cocoon, lifting him up and dropping him over and over again. The hunter fell to the ground for the 4th time, and blood came from his mouth. His friends watched, and their faces turned pale, but none of them tried to help him. Ki-hun, they whispered, shaking as they watched him struggle. He hit the ground with a thud. The healer, a woman, fell to her knees because her legs felt weak. Finally, the shaman lifted Ki-hun into the air, for a 5th time. This is taking longer than I thought. Oskumond. He held onto his sword tightly, even though things looked bad. Whoosh, bang, whoosh, bang, whoosh. Kumand's sword fell from his hand, as he was knocked to the ground repeatedly. Clang. Suddenly Kumand disappeared as he fell. What? The shaman said, surprised. Where did that pile of broken bones go? The boss looked around for Ki-hun. Is that? He found Ki-hun lying in a corner close by. Next to him was another man named Jinwoo. Jinwoo had helped Ki-hun to the ground and was now looking angrily at the shaman. Can I ask you something, Captain? Ki-hun was still trying to understand what had happened. Am I allowed to defeat all the magical creatures here? What are you talking about? As the upset shaman pointed with his chin, one of the guards ran toward Jinwoo swinging his blade, with his eyes glowing. Jinwoo looked at the approaching creature and held out his hand. A giant hand appeared and grabbed the guard, lifting him into the air. Goth. The creature struggled, but couldn't break free. How is this possible? The shaman's mouth dropped open in surprise. When Jinwoo pointed his finger downward, crash. The guard fell to the ground. Cracks appeared where it had fallen. But Jinwoo didn't stop. He lifted the guard's body into the air, just like the shaman had done with Ki-hun. Bang! Bang! The guard yelled as it bounced between the ceiling and the floor, like a basketball being dribbled, and finally its head got stuck in the ceiling. Bang! Pieces of the ceiling fell down. Everyone, including strong orc warriors and skilled hunters, was shocked to see the guard's body hanging there. Kassan was trembling as he asked Jinwoo. Who are you? I'll ask again. This was the hunter's area, and only one person spoke for all of them. Is it okay if I kill all the magical creatures here? Kassan didn't care who the carrier was anymore. He just wanted the magical creatures gone. He was very upset. He felt embarrassed that a magical creature had tricked him. Tears ran down his face. Please, please go ahead. That was all Jinwoo needed. As he stood up, the orcs started to move closer. Behind them was the shaman, who smiled at Jinwoo. You have some interesting abilities, especially for a human. With a wave of the shaman's hand, the orcs surrounded Jinwoo. But I wonder how useful your skills really are. Jinwoo's eyes became cold. He had never liked magical creatures. But now he really wanted to defeat one. I'm going to fight you last. If the creature could feel happy, it could also feel scared. Jinwoo said, My shadows. His knives appeared in his hand. Come here. A black car pulled to the side of the road. A man stepped out of the car wearing sunglasses and a black suit. His name was Jinchul, and he worked for the Hunters Association's surveillance team. 3 other team members got out with him. Manager Wu, weren't we going back to the association? I need to take care of something first. Jinchul looked toward the gate far away. Gates ranked as a level were always scary. He narrowed his eyes as he watched. What if that huge gate opened, and all the magical creatures came running out? Just thinking about it made his hair stand on end. But why did he want to work as a miner in such a scary place? And not just for 1 day, but for 2 whole days. Even if President Go hadn't asked him to look into things, Jinchul would have checked it out himself. He couldn't really find much information about this person. The other person was a very powerful awakened being, ranked at Since. It would be hard for Jinchul, who was ranked A, to investigate without being noticed. He decided to be brave and go say hello. His plan was to tell Jinwoo he was nearby running errands, and just stopping by. Then he would ask a few questions. It wouldn't seem weird to ask a few questions, would it? Anyone would wonder why a really strong hunter like Jinwoo would choose to do hard physical work. Also, Jinwoo had gotten the attention of the Hunters Association. The president of the association especially liked him, and was watching what he did. It wasn't strange at all. It was normal to be curious and ask questions. Jinchul kept telling himself this as he looked for someone from the Hunters Guild. Excuse me, I'm looking for the excavation team. May I ask who is looking? We're from the association. The staff checked Jinchul's ID, and showed him where the mining team was waiting. Right over there. Thank you. 4 people from the watching group came to see the digging team. The team leader looked like someone had told him they were coming, because he hurried over to greet them. Hello. Hello. What brings the watching group here? The digging team had been resting, but now they looked worried. The special monitoring group made the other hunters feel uneasy. They were the ones who decided what happened to powerful creatures that other hunters couldn't control. They had a lot of power. What's happening? Hunters from the monitoring group are here. The monitoring group. Something important was about to happen. Everyone was curious, so they slowly came closer to Yoonsuk. Jinchul took off his sunglasses. He looked around for Jinwoo but couldn't find him. Then he asked the worker in charge, "Where is Hunter Jinwoo Sung?" "I knew it," someone shouted, as a hunter stepped forward. It was Semgu, the same hunter who had bumped into Jinwoo yesterday. He was talking so quickly and excitedly that spit was flying everywhere. He turned and smiled at me, and it was really frightening. Just thinking about it makes me scared. Jinchul looked a little worried. What had happened between them? Everyone began talking loudly. Jinchul didn't pay attention to the noise, and instead focused on Seonggu. What exactly happened? Oh, Seonggu stopped talking when he realized his story didn't make him look good, so he ignored Jinchul's question. It wasn't a big deal, but his eyes were really frightening. Jinchul turned back to Yoonsuk. Where is Hunter Jinwoo Sung now? Sung is inside the gate. Jinwoo went into an active A-rank dungeon. Jinchul's eyes grew wide. Why? The person who carries equipment didn't show up. No one else offered to do the job, so Sung went instead. There's one more thing. What is it? I'm sure it's probably nothing. But Hunter Haeun Chan, was looking for Sung and followed him into the dungeon. That's really strange, the leader said. Looking puzzled, Jinwoo was very confused. After hearing this, Haeun Chad, who was second in command at the Hunters Guild, was looking for him, and she had even followed him into the dungeon. What could this mean? Jinchul only came to see how Jinwoo was doing, but he felt like he found something important. First, I need to look at the gate, he thought. That was all he could do right now. I would like to examine the gate. Of course, said the foreman with a laugh. and waved for Jinchul to go ahead. Senjua quickly stopped Jinchul as he was about to leave with his team. Oh sir, Seonggu looked hopeful. Did that mean person Jinwoo-sung caused a problem? Did he hurt someone? He seemed like he could. Jinchul's eye moved quickly. He now understood why Jinwoo had looked angry at Seonggu. Jinwoo could probably push him with just a quick movement. But many people were watching right now. As a member of the hunter group, he needed to stay calm around regular people. It was a difficult part of working for the organization. Jinchul took a deep breath and answered as kindly as he could. You will learn what happened on the news tomorrow night. Seonggu seemed happy with this answer, and responded confidently. See, I told you he was acting strangely. He didn't seem that way though. He was a good employee too. Seonggu didn't pay attention to what his coworkers said, and kept talking about how good he was at noticing trouble. Jinchul didn't look impressed and turned toward the gate instead. But Jinchul suddenly stopped a few steps from the gate. Manager Wu. His team looked at his surprised face. That can't be right. This doesn't make sense. Jinchul took out his phone, and went to the Hunters Association website. He looked for information about the A-rank gate. The Hunters Guild was supposed to be exploring today. His eyes grew wide. Why does it show such a low level of energy? He shook his head. The reading must be incorrect. Not all A-rank hunters are the same, and Jinchul was one of the best among them. He had a strong feeling that the reading from the gate wasn't right. He quickly told one of his team members, bring the manometer. Seeing how serious Jinchul looked, the team member hurried to get the meter from the car. The special nano reader the surveillance team used was much better than the ones everyone else at the association had. This one almost never made mistakes because it was made with very expensive, high-quality stones that cost over $1 billion. Beep. The reader finished checking. Just like I thought, there was a big difference compared to the association's reading. This could cause big trouble if the group had prepared a fighting team based on what they thought was true. They should be okay because there are two very strong members. But as Jinchul picked up the device that measured magical energy, a loud humming sound filled the air. The doorway began to shake. Jinchul trembled as a surge of magical energy rushed through him. His three helpers also shook, even though they weren't as strong as he was. Mr. Wu, one of them asked. What was that? Jinchul glanced at the youngest helper, whose face had become white. Are you okay? I'm fine. Jinchul looked closely at the back of his own hands. He noticed little bumps on his skin. Jinchul stood up straight. We are going in. What? You mean inside the dungeon? Jinchul was serious. If you are afraid, you can stay here. He was the only one who knew something wasn't right. It was his job to tell the hunters what was happening. Those in the Hunters Association were in charge of helping and watching over all hunters. No sir. We are coming. Jinchul nodded. And you stay here and tell the association what you just found. What? Can you do that? When Jinchul squeezed the shoulder of the youngest hunter, the hunter managed to nod. Yes. Yes sir. I can. Jinchul looked at the gate. Besides the strong power coming from the dungeon, there was another amazing source of energy sending out waves. What was happening in there? With Jinchul leading the way, the surveillance team rushed into the dungeon. At the same time, Hachin was trying to find the location of the strike squad inside the dungeon. Something was strange. Why aren't there any signs of monsters? Usually in a dangerous place like this, you would find the remains of creatures along the way, from the beginning to where the strongest monster lives. But Harin looked everywhere and couldn't find anything. Were all the magical creatures gathered in one place? She wondered about this as she found some dead animals. Thump, 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 and, a very strong fighter, rushed quickly to where the fighting had been. How could this happen? She looked around in surprise at the battlefield. All the bodies were strong orc fighters. They were different from regular orcs because of their red skin and long teeth. How did Kihon's team beat so many of them? Even more surprising, she didn't see any hunters who had fallen in battle. If any hunters had been hurt, the team would probably have gone back and saved her the trouble of coming here. Was she wrong about how good A and B level hunters were? It was possible she had underestimated them. From what Haim could see, the fight seemed like a clear win for the hunters. But what was that? Something caught her eye, and she bent down to look closely at one of the bodies. She was surprised by what she saw. She quickly checked the other bodies, here and here too. She was starting to believe something was wrong. But how could this happen? How was it possible? Nearly all of the large orc bodies had injuries made by a small pointed weapon. These attacks weren't deadly, but they were enough to stop the orcs from moving. It seemed like other hunters had just finished off work that someone else had already begun. They had completed a task where most of the hard work was already done by another person. One hunter had defeated 20 orcs. Only 2 of the orcs had died in a different way. One had lost its head, and the other had been struck hard on the head. Could one person really defeat all the rest? It seemed impossible. She was sure of her own speed, but she wasn't sure she could do this. She also didn't think anyone on Ki-hoon's team, who was a skilled fighter, used a small sword or knife. A knife made her think of something specific. She thought the man she saw near the boss's hiding place yesterday. Jinwoo had been carrying a small weapon in each hand. Could he be the one who caused all of this trouble? As she was starting to figure things out, Aiden quickly turned around and looked deep inside the dungeon. Her face was serious. She felt a surge of magic so strong. It felt like a shaking, unlike anything she'd ever felt before. The air around her even seemed to tremble. No. She bit her lip. If this was how powerful the enemy leader was, no one on Ki-hoon's team would be able to survive. She ran toward the cave as quickly as she could. Come out. That's where everything started. Wush's magical energy created waves stronger than the shaman's. But that wasn't the only thing that changed. As he showed his power, the shadow under Jinwoo's feet began to grow larger too. The shadow grew quickly, spreading out like ink in water.
Wow, what is that?
The team of hunters were amazed as they watched the shadow move under their feet. They didn't know how to understand it. Even the hunters with the most experience had never seen anything like it before. A feeling of fear began to grow in their hearts. Ki-hoon could see everything as he lay there, shaking and unable to move. What was he trying to do? He found out when a dark shadow spread across the entire floor of their hiding place. It made a strange sound. The black surface moved like water, and figures in black armor rose from the ground. A message appeared saying a special ability called Monarch's Domain had been activated. It said the abilities of all the shadow soldiers fighting would become 50% stronger. Jinwoo smiled. That was good. Monarch's Domain was a special skill he had earned, after becoming level 70 in the demon's castle. As the soldiers became even stronger, Jinwoo could tell they were feeling more confident. He was happy about that. The 50 shadow soldiers he had summoned stood around him like protectors. They growled and made fierce noises. Even the brave orc warriors stepped back, scared of Jinwoo and his soldiers. They're retreating. Someone shouted. What is going on? The hunters were surprised, but they started to feel hopeful. Did you feel that? One hunter asked. Yes, another replied. Does anyone understand what's happening? The hunters who could sense magical energy felt their hearts beat faster. They were amazed by what they were seeing. It was hard to believe such a powerful magic came from the hunter they brought to help. Was this even magic at all? It felt darker and more frightening than anything a shaman could do. The strength of the magic in the monster's cave made it difficult to breathe. The hunters were happy to have someone so powerful helping them. However, the tall orcs were very worried. When the shadow soldiers arrived, the fight became more balanced. Before, there was only one hunter fighting 100 fighty orcs. Now, there were 50 soldiers against the 150 orcs. Also, these weren't just any 50 soldiers. They were much stronger than they looked. As if to show this, Jinwoo ran forward first. When he did, the shaman shouted, "Why is everyone standing around? Kill that man right now." Excited by the shaman's magical voice, the large orcs lifted their weapons and roared. Grr, swish, clang. Monarch's Domain only affected the shadow soldiers, but even without any extra help, Jinwoo was incredibly strong. Ugh, grr. The orcs shouted. Bodies and blood flew around as Jinwoo quickly swung his 2 daggers. He moved so fast that even the best hunters could barely see him. Look at that. Yeah, he's amazing. Kain was called the dancer because when she fought, her movements were quick and graceful, like a fast dance. Kain felt shy about it, so she didn't like people talking about it, and not many people knew the name. But sometimes it would come up in conversation. The way the luggage carrier moved was as good as Haen's, or possibly even better. If Haen moved like a beautiful dancer, then Jinwoo moved like a powerful storm. He defeated magical creatures during a terrible storm. Roar. The dark soldiers fought bravely too. His soldiers led by Tank, who used to lead the Ice Bear warriors, ran towards their enemies. Iron stood at the very front of the battle line. As part of his preparation, he puffed out his chest and shouted loudly. A powerful shout echoed through the air. Iron tried to use a special skill to scare his enemies, but they were too strong to be affected. Angry that it didn't work, Iron yelled, and started hitting the orcs with his huge hammer. Swish, crack, crunch, ouch, Some of the hunters felt bad for the orcs who were fighting Iron. Unlike Iron, Igris quickly and cleanly defeated the enemies. The orcs who were defeated by Igris didn't even have time to shout. With each swing of his sword, another orc lost its head. It was harder for the regular shadow soldiers to fight the bigger orcs, but they were very strong and could heal quickly, so they had an advantage.